What's wild to me about Bon Iver is that he hasn't put out an album in years, and he's still one of the most influential artists of the decade. His new album is coming out this week. The group chat is here. We are going to get into Bon Iver's influence over music right now. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, picture it with me. It's a long winter, and it's finally over, and the spring thaw is here, and then you get this. And it's some new music from Justin Vernon, a.k.a. Bon Iver. Bon Iver has made us cry with his haunting, sad, but really beautiful songs. And then this Friday, we're getting his first album in 6 years. It's called Sable Fable, and he seems to be in a much happier place right now. But more importantly, his influences can be felt everywhere. From Taylor Swift to Noah Kahan to Charlie XCX to Phoebe Bridgers. How does this happen? How does a Wisconsin folk singer become one of the most important artists of the 21st century? Matthew Ismael Ruiz is here. Emilie Hanskamp is right here with me in studio. Good morning to both of you. How's it going?
Hey, Elamin.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm excited to talk about this, y'all. The vibes are very different around here. Look, Sable Fable comes out Friday. We have 7 of the 13 tracks out already available streaming. Emilie, the idea that you get a chorus from Bon Iver that says, "Damn, if I'm not climbing up a tree right now because everything is peaceful and right in me." I'm like, what is happening? Tell me about everything you've heard from this album so far.
First of all, we've heard too much. Can artists stop putting out half their albums before they drop the album? But my inner millennial is confused to hear Justin Vernon earnestly saying everything is peaceful love. I'm happy for the man. You know, it's like for over 15 years, your friend, your beautiful friend has just had this darkness following them around. Finally, the clouds are
You go, that's my dark
parting.
friend, you know?
That's my dark friend. We just want happiness for him. Finally, he has happiness. So there is that part of me. But Elamin, there's another part of me that, thinks about this story he told where he, the peak of his anxiety and his sadness, the overwhelm of the pressure of Bon Iver. He's out on stage, he starts crying, and he notices the crowd is like screaming. They're going wild for his sadness, and he clocks that like they're enjoying this. Mm-hmm. This has always been our relationship with him. His tragedies are art. So I'm very curious to see, and it's adjustment period for me of like, how do we respond to this new joyful, jubilant Bon Iver? It's going to take some time for me.
Yeah, the idea of a jubilant Bon Iver is it's a lot to take in, Matthew. And I just want to just play you this clip because Sable Fable is broken into 2 parts. This Sable and this Fable. So Bon Iver was on Jimmy Fallon recently. He talked about like the big concept behind this album.
Sable is just a little like sad and hard to get through and kind of drudgy and a look at the past. And it's kind of man in a cabin narrative that I've been kind of absorbing over these years. And accepting it in a way, but also like the rest of the record is sort of me kind of doing whatever I needed to do right now to be happy for once.
Doing what he needs to do to be happy right now, Matthew. Okay, what in terms of what he's saying there, how is that coming out in the music we've heard from Sable and Fable?
I mean, I definitely see that. The track that jumped out at me from the jump is Award Season.
Yeah.
Yes.
It kind of links to a moment in his career where he's ostensibly at his like critical commercial peak, and he feels that intense pressure to the point where what other artists might take as a springboard to like next level mainstream success, he's like, I got to step back. This is too much. Mm-hmm. And so you can get a kind of a peek into the anxiety that comes with a moment like that from someone who is as introspective as him, who is, carries that yearning and, that type of person that would need to retreat to a cabin to go explore their feelings on record, right? And then, transitioning into the second half, I do feel just like a little bit of the freedom he may be experiencing right now, like achieving the peace in a sense of not necessarily feeling the pressure one way or the other, of being able to be like, I've had this career where I've, not just people might have applied a particular narrative to me, but like I also have like expressed myself in many different ways. Mm-hmm. And he's using a lot of those tools in understated ways, in a way that shows that this is an artist that doesn't feel like he has to prove anything to us. And, I can feel a little bit of that freedom, of that peace.
Yeah, he can just kind of show up where he is right now. I mean, like the idea, you describe his songs as yearning. I'm like, that's my CYO right there. That's a chief yearning officer of a generation. And I think to fully understand where Bon Iver, why it's so surprising for a lot of people that Bon Iver is in this happier place, it may be useful to just kind of like, just for a moment, root us back in where it all started. Let's listen to this.
And I told you to be patient, and I told you to be fine, and I told you to be balanced, and I told you to be kind.
Skinny Love from Bon Iver's 2007 debut album, For Emma Forever Ago. He famously recorded this album in a cabin on his own in rural Wisconsin. Emilie, talk to me about the immediate impact that an album like that has when it just kind of hits you in that moment.
I feel like if I speak to me, I'm speaking to a lot of, emo, melodramatic millennials at the time. You're thinking like this is peak mainstreaming of great indie music. We're coming out of the OC. I'm just like primed for like great indie music. Moment. That's the moment. And then you have this lore coming through. What's the polar opposite of Everything is Peaceful Love? A man hunting his own venison and locking himself in a cabin and making a heartbreak record, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And so here it comes in. On one side, it's so accessible. I mean, for a listener, you feel like you're kind of in that cabin with him.
Yeah.
For a musician, you feel like maybe you could grab a guitar and channel that energy. And yet it's so elusive, right? What is Bon Iver ever, up until this record that we're listening to now, The Sable Fable, what is he ever even talking about? It's opaque songwriting. We don't really know, but it's this evocativeness that people were really kind of grasping onto, and kind of this dangling carrot within the indie music industry that everyone's kind of been trying to chase ever since, I think.
So I think he's someone who paints with a lot of colors, and you get this sort of like impressionistic, moody kind of artist, but then very quickly, Matthew, you kind of end up seeing him move into the space where he says, I can paint with all of the colors available. So within 3 years, there's no way to predict that like the guy who made that song, then you also he end up hearing him make this song.
I'm lost in the world, but now I'm home. I'm blue in the city, and I'm down for the night, down for the night. Says she's down.
The look on Matthew's face is like, I miss the old Kanye. Like that's
literally what the look is, bro.
The deepest sadness. But that's 2010. That's Lost in the Woods, Kanye West, but also Justin Vernon on production. Justin Vernon also on that song, like on that track. It's actually based on his song Woods. This turned out to be the first of many collaborations that Bon Iver ends up having in the world of hip hop and R&B, including Travis Scott. I know Vince Staples. We end up seeing a collaboration with Lizzo. What do you think it is about someone like Bon Iver and the credentials that he brings to that world that makes people go, you know what, I really want to work with this guy. I really want to work with someone like him. Like, why does Travis Scott go, you know what I need is a Bon Iver record?
Well, I think it's twofold. I'm glad you chose that particular song because you've got a little bit of Kanye's, process in that he hears something that inspires him and then immediately, wants to put his own, input on it. And then once he taps that, everybody, especially in that moment, is like, oh my God, what's this? I got to know about this. Kanye's tapped into this. But also, there's, and it aligns with, his aesthetic in that moment with 808s and Heartbreak and whatnot, where he's going with the auto-tune. But specifically, that tool had been, done to death. And I think a lot of people, are drawn to someone who's able to use it to actually emote, right? To be able to permeate that robotic layer that auto-tune does to your voice, and actually tap into some genuine emotion. And he's shown that he's very skilled in that, beyond his mastery of melody and his just songwriting craft in general, which I think is what makes it easy to work with him once you're actually in the studio. But Kanye pointing at you in that moment, it's going to make everybody pay attention. And you can see how Charlie XCX might be like, oh yeah, that beat actually slaps. I want to, dance, don't want to dance to that. Or Travis Scott being like, oh shit, this guy's actually, able to communicate some of this emotion that I'm trying to tap into with my, my emo raps or whatever you want to call it. So you can see a little bit of the songwriting craft and the emoting, really shining through, despite this layer that is usually so good at separating emotion from the voice.
What I'm trying to get us to do is like chart a journey from the guy in the cabin in the woods to the guy coming out of the cabin and being like, everything is peaceful. Because he's gone through so many different iterations in that journey. And one of those iterations is as he starts to sort of get all this critical acclaim, that he's like the guy that Kanye wants to work with. He's the guy that everybody wants to work with. He starts winning a couple of Grammys. And then you start to get music that sounds like this.
Staying at the Ace Hotel, calm but loud. I would just be floating to you now. You make me pass to let it pass on. I'm climbing the dash.
Emilie, I feel, okay, first of all, that's Bon Iver, 33 God from 2016. There's something that keeps happening with Bon Iver where every time that people are like, I'm ready to welcome this warm thing into my house, he's like, no, I'm much more interesting and opaque and I'm unknowable, you know? And I shall be more experimental. What do you make of his kind of instinct to kind of just retreat and run away a little bit over his career?
Well, first I have to go on record that 22 million, that's my Bon Iver. That's my favorite. I just need everyone to know that. But it's interesting to talk about this now because we're at a time when artists are shoving this idea of eras and transformations down our throats so disingenuously that it's indirect and intentional reaction to the mainstream.
You didn't grow. You just made a new album.
Yes.
What I mean?
And so I feel like that conversation is now where we're at. But Bon Iver, I feel like that outward intention is not really what I associate with him. He's a very intentional artist, but I see it much more so as inward. Less of like, what am I not hearing out there? And more just so like, what do I want to hear? So on paper, yes, it's like he had that cabin, stripped down acoustic album. You like that? Well, here's some extensive like 30 musician chamber pop. You like that? Well, here's some glitchy auto-tune. Yeah. On paper, yes, he is kind of, swerving the mainstream. Yeah. But I think that when you don't color in the lines, when you're kind of tap dancing around all these genres, on one side, it allows you to, simultaneously be so mainstream that Taylor Swift and Kanye West have your number. Mm-hmm. Yet at the same time, no one can quite pigeonhole you. So your elusiveness actually allows you to sort of keep swerving the mainstream in a way that current artists think that they can do, but they can't grasp that.
You just stay a little bit on the margins.
Exactly.
Just a little bit touching the margins.
You can't catch him. We can't pigeonhole him.
No,
we can't,
and we keep trying,
Oh, don't we?
But I mean, and also like when there's an artist who sort of like resolutely sticks to the margins like that, what you end up getting, Matthew, is offshoots that sort of try to bring elements of that artist a bit more closer to the mainstream, right? We talk about all the time about like Taylor Swift having a lot of Taylor daughters, Tay daughters. Olivia Rodrigo is a descendant of Taylor Swift's school of pop music. The descendants of Bon Iver's school of music are so many. And like among them, Noah Kahan, among them, Zach Bryan. And those are people who are deeply influenced by him, have made songs with him at this point. Do you think this is a weird time, Matthew, for Bon Iver to be coming out in a moment when the field is crowded, as a matter of fact, with people who have learned at least a part of their craft through listening to Bon Iver? Does that make it difficult for him to sort of regain his place?
I don't think it does, actually. And just to piggyback on what Emilie's saying, like he's not following mainstream trends. He's setting them by doing exactly what he wants. I mean, literally nobody was trying to bite Bruce Hornsby back when he this was tapping into that easy listening vibe, right? Like nobody like heard that stuff and was like, yo, I can make a slapper with this. But he did. And like that to me, that's someone who's true to themselves, right? Yeah. Like that's someone who's like not really concerned with like, is this commercially viable? But like, does this speak to my truth? Yeah. And last time I was on the show, we talked about Ethel Cain taking a hard left with her record. And like, that may have been a very specific response to stuff that's happening in her life. But with him, I think it's more of just like, he might be mentally still in that cabin. He mentioned in that Fallon clip, like he's embracing at least a part of that energy that drew him to retreat in that way. Mm-hmm. And he can still, be there in a songwriting sense without having to physically, go there, I think. And I think that's a great place for an artist to create, especially if it allows you to tap into something real, and it doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't even have to be innovative or experimental if it is genuine. I think he's at a point where people are going to listen regardless of how flashy it is, regardless of who the guest star is, regardless of the marketing campaign. People are going to tap in. And so if it's real, it's going to resonate.
And I think like that's the bar that we hold Bon Iver to, right? Like is more than any other artist. I think like if I hear it and I go, oh, that's coming from a real place, and I feel like I can have a reasonable assessment of that. I can connect with it. I think the first song that I heard from the new project was in fact Awards Season, and just that opening line that I can handle way more than I can handle, so I keep reaching for the handle to flood my heart. I'm like, that's what I go to Bon Iver for. Absolutely. That's the thing that you go to him for. Tell me, Emilie, do you see Bon Iver in direct conversation with what's happening in music right now? Or is he, even with the stuff that we've heard so far, just kind of like, sticking to the margin, happy to be where I am, thank you very much?
I mean, I think he wrote a lot of the conversation that we're having right now, right? It's like, if you look at the footnotes of the contemporary music scene right now, Justin Vernon's name is all over those pages, right? If let's consider the biggest kind of pop music moments in the last few years. So Charlie XCX's Brat, he was remixed and obviously super influential and included on that album featured. Taylor Swift's Folklore, would that have ever happened without Bon Iver, both in terms of her songwriting approach, in the sound, in the narrative? I don't think it would have. Also
literally featured on the record,
Of course, that too, but even just her having kind of channeling that kind of, even the COVID energy of it all is like Cabin in the Woods energy.
Real.
And then even Ed Sheeran has a Bon Iver tattoo. I mean, these might not be your favorite artists, but I guess what I'm saying is that at the top levels trickling down, his imprint is so inextricably linked to artists and musicianship right now that he has to be in the conversation whether or not he wants to. He's just integrated in a real way.
Justin Vernon, whether you are in the cabin or out of the cabin, just one of the most influential artists of our time. I appreciate both of you being here. Thank you for your time and your energy. I really appreciate it. Go back to your cabins in the wood. Thanks.
Cry now.
Do it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks again. Emilie Hanskamp is a freelance music writer based in Toronto, and Matthew Ismael Ruiz is a freelance music writer in New York. Bon Iver's new album, Sable Fable, is out this Friday. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. It has been almost a month since Adolescence came out. That's the British show about a 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a girl in his class. The show is still currently one of the most top-watched shows on Netflix. I think it's kind of hard to think of a drama that has generated more discussion and also more policy action in such a short period of time. Just last week, the British Prime Minister announced that Adolescence is going to be shown in UK schools. So to talk about why she believes all of us need to make time to watch the show, we've got Marsha Lederman back with the show. She wrote a piece in the Global Mail recently making that case. Marsha, good morning, friend.
Hi, Elamin. So good to see you.
It's nice to have you here. Yeah, it's nice to have you here. Listen, it's been a month. Why are we still talking about Adolescence?
Oh, because it's a talker and so relatable as well. But it's great television on top of that. But more than anything, it's the kind of show that you just want to talk about once you've finished watching it, because it's a window into a world that essentially is happening right under us, right before our eyes, but we're not part of it. Yet it's affecting each of us so much. I realize it or not. There's so much to unpack, right? And after you watch it, you just want to talk about it to everyone. It's been a couple of weeks since I watched the whole thing, and I keep thinking about it. It's on my mind constantly.
You said you had to force yourself to watch the show. They had to start and then stop, several times. I had the same experience, but I want to just hear from you. Why was it so hard for you to watch the show?
Oh, well, first of all, there's how real it feels, right? It's so well done. It's so well written and acted. And the one-shot conceit, because each episode is created with one continuous shot. So it's 1 hour into this family's life that you're viewing, or the investigation that you're viewing. So it feels very real. Like the verisimilitude makes it that much harder to watch. And, you're watching, just to go into the first scene, the police are bursting into this home of this family, this normal family. It could be my house, it could be your house, and what's going on? Oh my God, they're after the kid, that sweet little kid who's just wet his pants. He's terrified. The parents are freaking out. They have no idea that their sweet child could be up to anything that would bring the police into their home. And
Mm-hmm.
you're watching it and you're thinking, oh my God, what is my kid up to?
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels so real as you watch it. And also, when I started watching it, I didn't know anything about what it was. I just
Mm-hmm.
knew someone said to me, "You got to watch Adolescence," and so I tuned in thinking it was going to be like a window into what it's like to be an adolescent, like kind of like I don't know, parenthood or 30 something.
It is not like Parenthood, not at all like Parenthood, not even a little bit like Parenthood.
And
Yeah.
no, and I was expecting that kind of treatment. So I had to stop. I think I stopped 3 times actually. And then I
Mm-hmm.
forced myself to watch it because I knew it was so good and I knew it was going to be important, and it really is.
Yeah, I got to tell you, like, this was a show that I thought I would watch. I mean, these are 4 one-hour episodes. I thought that I would just sit down and watch them all back to back to back. And it took me 2 days to work up the courage to go from episode 1 to episode 2. It took me 3 days to work up the courage from episode 2 to episode 3. I think I needed a week. No, not a week, but I think like I needed like three or 4 days after episode 3, because I think that was like the hardest one to watch out of all of them. So I hear you on the starting and stopping. I want to play you a moment from this. It's like this really harrowing scene towards the end of the show where Jamie's parents are talking about why they didn't see the signs that something was about to go horribly wrong.
Never left his room. He'd come home, slam the door straight up the stairs on the computer. I'd see the light on at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'd knock and I'd say, "Jamie, come on, son, you've got school tomorrow." And the lights would turn off, but he never said nothing.
We couldn't do nothing about that. All kids are like that these days, aren't they? You can't keep an eye on them all the time, love. We just can't.
I was a good mum.
It's a very common story that you hear from so many different parents. The idea of like walking past your kid's bedroom and seeing the light is on and be like, "Hey, it's time to get to bed. You know, what are you doing in there?" And then like they turn off the light and they go to sleep. Like that's the extent to which those parents knew their kid. Marsha, you have a teenage son. A big theme in Adolescence that like you don't really necessarily know what's going on with your kids, what's happening on their screens. Did the show scare you as you were watching it?
Oh my God, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
I'm also that parent. Like even just listening to that clip right there was really emotional for me and upsetting because, yeah, my kid, he's 16. He's spending all his time, or not all, but a lot of his time on his computer, in his room, or on his phone. And, I think, okay, he's gaming, he's communicating with his friends. That's how they communicate these days. He's watching TikTok. He's doing stuff that kids do. How, you think it's okay. And I tell myself, well, Marsha, you talked on the phone for hours with your friends when you were his age, with my parents yelling at me to get off the phone because they needed it. That's how ancient I am. But, it just tells you how far removed we are from that generation. Even the cop doesn't understand the emojis until his son explains it to him. It's a whole language that we don't speak. It's a world we don't have access to. I think of myself as fairly plugged in. I talk to my kid a lot, but there's stuff going on for sure that I don't know about. And that is really scary.
First, I want to just acknowledge the idea of you getting emotional hearing that clip, because that scene is an emotional scene, right? Like when you watch that scene, it's towards the conclusion of the series, and you kind of just are arriving at these parents who are sort of trying to reckon with this with this unknowable part of their kids' lives and the way that they couldn't really get to know it. I think that's one of the things that resonate the most about the show. But then too, I think like what I want to talk to you about is what you do with that fear. But we are about to run out of time on the radio, Marsha. We're going to keep going on our YouTube stream. We're going to keep going on our podcast conversation. But we're about to run out of time for radio. So what I want to do is just take a moment to say goodbye to our radio audience. And if they want to hear the rest of this conversation, they will have that available to them on our podcast feeds. It'll be available on our YouTube feeds. Marsha Lederman is a columnist of the Globe and Mail, and we are talking about the Netflix show Adolescence. We do got to say goodbye to the radio audience for right now, but I really, really want you guys to hear the rest of this conversation because there's so much more to talk about. The longer version is available on your podcast feeds. It's also available on YouTube. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. If you're listening on the radio, this show will be back tomorrow. We would love to see you then. Okay, Marsha, let me pick up exactly where you were there, this idea of the fear that you just mentioned. Because now that you've watched it, there's this question of like, what do you do? What do you do with that fear and the terrifying possibilities that it kind of opens up for you? Like, what's the action coming out of this? How do you move through the world differently because you have been exposed to this fear because of the show?
Well, unfortunately for my son, I'm now grilling him on a regular basis about what he's seeing online, which has prompted a lot of eye rolling, I'll tell you, Elamin. But also some conversations. And I hope that some of what I'm saying is getting through. I'll just talk at him and I think something is getting through.
Has he watched the show? Has he watched the show? Like,
no.
Okay.
So that's an interesting question. So I tried to get him to watch it with me, and he refused. His dad also suggested that they watch it together, and he refused. Your kids get to a point where you can't force them to do stuff. You can't force them to eat their veggies or watch a harrowing 4-part series on Netflix. So, but I've made him aware of it. Yeah. And although he might have known about it, it's certainly out there. I think the kids are talking about it. And then our role as parents is to communicate and to pay attention. I think I referenced it in my column. I did. There's a white ribbon campaign going on right now called My Friend Max Hate. And it looks at the influence that the manosphere can have on a young boy. And it starts with a kid having a bad day at school, like in gym class. And then he's at home feeling down. And you can tell he kind of wants to talk to his mother, or he wants some comfort from his mother, but she needs to go to work and she's got to head off. So, which is completely valid. So then he turns to his phone, because for that generation, their phones are their guidance, their friends, their company, which isn't great, but it's true. And so they might innocently feed a question into like, how do I stand up to the bullies at school? Or how do I get a girl to like me? Or whatever. And who knows what's being.
Oh, I might have lost you there for a moment, Marsha. If you can still hear me, I kind of lost you at the moment when you said, who knows what's being, and then I lost you. Oh,
am I back?
You're back now. Okay, pick up there. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We can't control the algorithm, just like I can't control my internet connection right now. But we can be there for our kids as much as we can and try to talk to them. So I think that's the action for us. I also appreciate that there's a discussion about showing this at schools.
Right. UK is doing this, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And in my case, okay, so my son doesn't want to watch it with me, but maybe if he watched it at school with a trusted adult leading the conversation, like the guidance counselor, maybe, who's amazing at my kid's school, maybe that would help. But to be honest, I actually think this show was much more important for the parents to watch than the kids. They know what's going on.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I think I take seriously the point that you said, because my kid is turning 8 tomorrow, and your kid is 16, and there's a journey between where I am in my parenting journey and where you are, where my ability to influence the outcomes of that child's life are going to change, and have not yet come to accept it, Marsha, and that's fine. Okay, so we are talking about adolescence, and in the article that you wrote for the Globe and Mail, you make this link between the toxic masculinity that underpins the incident at the center of that story, where a 13-year-old boy is arrested for the murder of a teenage girl. And then also what we're seeing in real world politics right now. Can you unpack that for me? Can you make that connection?
Well, look who we have in the White House right now. Someone who is a felon, who has committed sexual assault, a liar, a cheat, a man who puts down women, who has made fun of people with disabilities. I mean, I could go on. But how did he get there? The manosphere contributed to his rise. These alt-right podcasters and streamers held him up. And, I just yesterday was reading a really good piece in the New Yorker about these streamers, right-wing streamers and politics. And it wasn't about adolescence at all, but I thought, oh my God, it's the same impulse. It's the same thing. They're speaking to an aggrieved male population that feels like society has done them wrong. And listen, life's hard right now. I get it. It's hard for everyone.
Yeah.
But in this case, they're voting accordingly. And then we've got Donald Trump surrounded by all these other bros whose values are consistent with his. I use the term values loosely. And now we've got the stock market in free fall, and people being picked off the streets for participating in protests, and Canadians worrying about their sovereignty. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
going
of course.
on here.
No, hey, I mean, those are a bunch of flags. Yeah.
So that's the damage.
Yeah.
But also there's the message, like, you could be like me, be tough and angry and no holds barred and unapologetic about your toxic masculinity. And look where you can rise to the White House. You can have your court cases thrown out. Not only is he not going to jail, he's the president again, and he's affecting the whole world. Sorry, I'm going off on a Donald Trump rant here, but
that's what you're here for, Marsha, by all means. Yeah.
To rant. So yeah, I think that's a terrifying thought in terms of what young minds are, both in terms of how they act socially and what they believe in ideologically and how they vote.
I think what's striking to me is that even with a bad connection that sometimes goes in and out, what I'm picking up from you is just being like, this is the show that should sort of point us to all the alarms that should be ringing in our society right now. So you wrote, just a last question here. You wrote, a TV show cannot save us from toxic masculinity, but it can remind us that there before the grace of God go us. We can't just keep our heads in the sand. Do you think that collectively, do you think we want to confront this reality? Like, are we ready to do that work? Or are we actually pretty comfortable with our heads in the sand right now?
Oh, we have to confront it. And I apologize for my internet connection.
You're in Yellowknife. I totally get it. Totally understandable.
Right now. So yeah, no, we have to. I mean, the alternative is so much worse. We can't keep our heads in the sand. It is a comfortable place to be, but what's happening to the sand as we're stuck there? I think that, I mean, there's so many issues that this brings up. I think about the dad, for instance. So he is, we learn more about him. I think it's in episode 4. His dad was embarrassed that Jamie wasn't good in sports, and his dad had a temper. He brought the shed down, he talks about. But the dad later talks about his own father beating him and how he managed not to beat his children. Sorry, that sounds ridiculous how I just
No, that was he phrased it as like that's the win. That his win was that he didn't beat his children.
Right. Yeah. But he still had that temper in him.
Yes.
And Jamie has inherited that temper. We see it in episode 3.
Sorry, Marsha. I lost
psychologist.
I lost you there just again. Can you just pick that up again? So, and Jamie inherited something. Let's try that one more time.
Okay. Am I?
You're back. You're back. You're back and you're great. You sound great.
Yes.
Go for it.
So Jamie inherited that temper. He has it as well. And we really see it in that episode 3 with the psychologist. He's succeeded by sheltering his children from the violence that he experienced. Mm-hmm. But the son has also inherited that temper. And I mean, there's no easy answer here, but the influence of the manosphere has perhaps provoked that temper in a way that the father had no idea was happening. So basically what I'm saying is, very long, internet unstable way to answer your question. We need to know what's going on. Otherwise, we might think that everything's okay. And, hopefully it is, but we have a responsibility as parents, as educators, as a society to ensure that things are safe for everyone.
Marsha, I appreciate you because even with a spotty internet connection, you are still loud and clear. You're the best, man. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Yes, of course. Anytime. Marsha Lederman is a columnist with the Globe and Mail, normally based in Vancouver, currently in a spotty hotel connection, but in Yellowknife right now. Please go read her column on Adolescence. It is up on the Globe and Mail's website. Adolescence, by the way, still streaming on Netflix right now. Go watch all 4 episodes. It might take you a minute. That is totally okay. That is it for the podcast today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.